I think the hardest part, or the harder part, of Lara's argument is the first step, which we discussed in the last video, and that was this notion that in knowledge, cognition, this sense of our knowing the world and our ability to make statements about the world, that there's always a conceptual element, a conceptual component to cognition, to knowledge. That is, that we cannot be said to know anything unless we have employed a concept. That is, these general ideas that allow us to order the raw data of our sensory intuitions. That is a difficult concept, a very big thing in philosophy, and Lehrer sort of throws it at us without a lot of explanation. But once you grasp that, I think the second step in his argument is fairly simple. It may not be plausible, it may be wrong, but I think it's simple, and that is to say that if every statement we make about the world uses concepts, then what about those concepts? How sure are we of the concepts that we use to make knowledge claims? Lehrer's claim is that history shows, both the history of individuals and the history of communities, maybe world history, the history of human beings in their collective attempt to understand the world, especially in science, let's say, or other fields, that concepts which at one time looked perfectly adequate in order to describe the world turn out, for one reason or another, to be inadequate and to not accurately or usefully describe the world, and are discarded or changed, refurbished, transformed, but sometimes utterly discarded. If we keep in mind that this change is something that could happen to any of the concepts that we employ, even the most basic concepts that we employ to describe our everyday experience, then we're open to the possibility that any of the claims that we make about the world may indeed be in error, because the concepts that we use in order to make those claims may be ones that we no longer have faith in. Lehrer says on page 206 in the third paragraph, the stronger conclusion, the conclusion that there is a real probability that any of the contingent statements that we think are true about the world may be false. The stronger conclusion may be obtained by consideration of the implications of conceptual change. No matter how well entrenched a concept may be in our beliefs about the world, it remains always and constantly subject to total rejection. To obtain our objectives, scientific or other, we may discard a concept as lacking a denotation. That is, we may decide that a concept that we thought applied to things in the world, that is, had a denotation, applied truly to certain things in the world, turns out upon further review to lack denotation at all. That is, does not denote anything, does not apply to anything. In the history of science, there are many such concepts which at one time were thought to apply to things in the world, and which, when the science moved on, were decided were empty concepts, did not apply to anything in the world, had no denotation. In the history of chemistry and physics, there's a discarded concept called phlogiston. Phlogiston was the notion that if we could account for why things got hot by the notion that there was actually a substance in them, a fluid actually, that made them hot, called phlogiston. When the modern theory of heat as mere motion of molecules took over, that the concept of phlogiston was discarded entirely. It was thought to be empty and have no denotation. In one's individual life, we may grow up believing in ghosts, and some adults believe in ghosts, and that's fine. I don't. I would say that in my own life, at one time, when I was like 8, I believed that there were ghosts, and sometimes I believed that they were around. Now I realize I was wrong, and the main reason I was wrong is because there are no ghosts. The word ghost has only a metaphorical or figurative use. It has no literal use. There are no departed souls that still wander the earth and occasionally haunt living human beings. It turned out to be a concept without any denotation. What is Lehrer's, I guess, big message here is that, well, believe it or not, he says, however plausible this may or may not sound, all concepts are subject to that kind of revision and even discarding. He says on page 207 in the first full paragraph, the continual flux, the stream of change, of continual mutation, the continual flux in our acceptance and rejection of concepts explains why there is some chance that any concept does not apply to what we think it does. No concept is immune from the ravishment of conceptual change, leaving it without any application whatsoever. Whatever contingent statement you think is true, there is some chance, some probability, that a concept applied in the statement lacks application. Hence, there is some chance you are wrong. However slender and not worth worrying about the chance or error may be, it is real. The reality of that change is an objective feature of the world. And that's the big message. It's not obviously true. It's kind of a radical thesis that any of the concepts that we use, even the most familiar and indispensable, are subject to thorough revision or even complete and utter rejection. Now that's a big pill to swallow, but at least gives us a sense of why one may, for one reason, be a skeptic, and that is to say that, well, all of our knowledge relies on concepts. We must employ concepts in cognition. And if we believe further that all of our concepts are subject to radical change or outright rejection, then we have a reason for being skeptical of even the most basic and seemingly obvious knowledge claims.